Organization of Networks for Empathy, and the editor of Fostering Empathy Through Museums and Designing for Empathy, Perspectives on the Museum Experience, which are considered as reference books in empathy building through museums, a field of inquiry she pioneered in 2014. She developed Designing for Empathy as a patented intellectual framework and one as an international platform for multidisciplinary, multi-sector, and multicultural collaborations to deepen our understanding of empathy and to develop strategies, scholarships, and empathy building experiences that consider the well-being of the all of humanity and our planet. In 2018, Dr. Gökçeadem curated and co-chaired the world's first empathy summit titled Fostering Universal and Ethics and Compassion Through Museums with His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in Dharamshala, India. If I am wrong, please correct me, Ms. Gökçeadem. Elif grew up in Istanbul studying history of art at MSU and ITU with a focus on Islamic arts and mysticism, and later museum studies at the GWU in Washington, D.C. Currently, she offers empathy building workshops and consulting services through one, teaches at the GWU Corcoran School of the Arts and Design, and serves as a member of the board of trustees at the Museum of Us. So thank you, Dr. Gökçeadem, again for participating our speech, Red Talk speech. Okay, now the word is for you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for having me a part of your talk series. It's an honor for me to be here. As we know, empathy permeates all aspects of our lives. So some people associate it as a soft skill, or might be related to arts, or music and literature, but it is also very relevant to engineering and sciences, and all kinds of design. So in this talk, I would like to share just a quick overview of what I would like to share today. Designing for Empathy will talk about why empathy, what is empathy, who gets to design for empathy, and where can we do this, and how it can be done, and then what? Then what happens? What is the use of this this product that we might call empathy, which happens, even when we do not realize, in our everyday lives all the time. But if we are not intentional about it, and if we are not articulating it enough, it sort of escapes us, without us having a chance to really look at our empathy, our capacity for empathy, and our ability to empathize in a deeper way, because it goes beyond just, and developing an understanding or compassion towards another, but it is also key to unleashing a part of ourselves that can put us on a journey to better understand our own humanness, our purpose, and mission in life. So I would like to start with this image, and I would like to share with you, even when we are not under the same roof, but we are all looking at the same image under different roofs. But our perception and our understanding of this image, as well as the meanings that we might associate with it, will be different, even when we are looking at the exact same image. And this difference is a result of our overarching worldview and how we each perceive the world. Imagine this worldview as a pair of glasses through which we see our world and our place in this world. And because we each possess a pair of lenses that are unique to us, even when we are looking at the same picture, such as this one, the meanings we will associate with these, with this photo, for example, with the clouds and the beach and the ocean and the sunset, will be different. And it is important to understand this, because I think this is key to a realization that as human beings, we are thresholds between two worlds, the world of material and the world of essence, the world of body and meaning, something physical and something meaning related, it's qualities related. So our experience of this world is greatly influenced by how we make meaning. And how we make meaning, as we discussed, determines how we see ourselves and our place in this world. And how we see ourselves and our place in this world influences our attitudes and behavior towards the others. If we are seeing ourselves as separate from a whole that we are part of, our attitudes towards the others will be different. But if we consider ourselves as a part of something greater than ourselves, then our attitudes and behavior will change and will be calibrated and harmonized with the whole of which we are all a part accordingly. So this is where empathy comes. We have more reasons through empathy. We discover our connectedness and connections to others. And through that discovery, we can find more reasons and opportunities to find meaning. And this is important because we love what we find meaningful, and what we love, we protect. So our ability to make meaning and ability to expand our meaning-making opportunities through empathy then influences how we behave and how the kinds of choices that we make in our world. Empathy, our ability to imagine what it might be like to be another, is critical for us to expand our circle of care beyond ourselves to others around us, and eventually also encompassing those we may never meet or those who might be very different from us. Through empathy, we can expand our library of narratives and lived experiences as if we have already lived them. And expanding our library of narratives expands our paradigms and worldviews. Practicing empathy leads us to develop expansive, integrative worldviews, which are open to differences without judgment, versus separative worldviews, which are only influenced by the ego's desire of always being at the center of our own attention, leading to a fear of the other and the unfamiliar, and causes isolation and fragmentation in communities. Empathy allows us to feel the expansiveness of our hearts, to hold the other in the safety of a non-judgmental space in our hearts, which we may call our capacity for love. Empathy and love for even those we have never seen before, or we may never encounter in our lives, or that may look very different. So here it is important to also consider empathy beyond just human beings or people who look like us or they believe in the same things that we do, but those creatures, the things that exist around us in this world that are very different from us. As an engineers and scientists, this might even include our planet's resources, its layers, innermost layers and outermost layers, including the mineral and what makes air, water, so on and so forth. So empathy helps us develop a rich library of narratives and leads to wider possibilities for finding meaning and belonging through our connections. So this allows us to connect, consider ourselves in a different scale in the universe as part of something greater than ourselves, and not just limited to our bodies, but a connection through our essence to something wider than our own existence in this world. And why is this important? It is important because as our world is facing these complex problems, and you probably have seen the Sustainable Development Goals that were developed by the United Nations. Just to give you an example, let us consider this statement. They say, the United Nations says, to achieve a sustainable future for all, we need to act urgently to protect biodiversity, the web of life that connects and supports us all. So this is a very important statement, but does it get anybody to act on it? So empathy is not an intellectual connection. It's an emotional connection that creates a heart space for the other. So intellect is important to understand the facts and the many reasons, but without that emotional connection, it is very difficult to choose to act on behalf of something. That's why, what our meaning making through empathy is important, because we tend to protect those we love and we find meaningful. And I call this the elephant in the room because there's this fragmented way of seeing the world today. And if you go back, if I can give you an example, let's say deep sea mining. Why should we care about deep sea mining? These are just minerals that are being, harnessed in the bottom of the ocean. We will never be there. If they hadn't published it in the news, we probably wouldn't even know that they existed. But it is very important because it touches the balance of the world, and it is not just about number 14, right? Life below water. It affects the climate. It affects number 15, life on land. It affects hunger, health and well-being, and all those things are actually very deeply interconnected. But there's a way of seeing these as as connected one, and empathy can help us get there, attain that vision. I believe that there's an urgent paradigm shift is needed from fragmentation to unity, from I to all, and empathy is the spark. Empathy is also, as I mentioned, besides the increasingly complex problems that our world is facing, empathy also unleashes something about ourselves that can give us meaning, help us finding our own meaning and purpose in this life. Through empathy, when we realize that we are connected to something greater than ourselves, we tend to choose altruism and compassion to be in sort of a more harmonized relationship with the whole, which we are all also apart, each apart. And then this leads to a sense of purpose, because altruism is found to have the same effect of, for example, eating a bar of chocolate that you kind of get addicted to because it feels so good and you want to feel the same sort of that feeling good sense in yourself. So you tend to repeat it. And this leads to finding a fulfillment for our human potential, and eventually, as we more expand our capacity for empathy, we can also start including those others who are not like us, who are very different from us, in a non-judgmental space in our hearts, which we may call love. So it is an infinite circle, really. But empathy is just one of the portals into the circle that can determine our survival on this planet as species, as the human species. So when we look at, from a different perspective, in the institutional or societal perspective or through the systems perspective, these are some of the major problems that our world is facing, right? Equity, diversity, inclusion, social and environmental justice. Empathy lies at all meaningful solutions to each one of these problems, but it requires an investment, an intentionality in our approach to it. Like Mevlana Rumi said, and you are not a drop in the ocean, but you are the entire ocean within a drop. So this is a really excellent metaphor for what I'm trying to say, is that, understanding that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And this is a beautiful way of putting it. As drops, how can we then experience that we are really a part, we are integral to something greater than ourselves? So we are not just parts, so we are not just parts of a puzzle with, you know, corners and edges and sort of predetermined shapes, but in essence, we are all connected and all one. But in our embodied experience as human beings, it requires an experience, a lived experience, to shift that paradigm so that we start seeing ourselves as something connected to something greater than ourselves. And I love this quote by Kabir Helminski, and he says, "The drop that truly knows itself is aware of the ocean." So empathy, even though we might think that it is a nice thing to have, to be, you know, helpful to others, or to be compassionate to others, or have more dialogue, you know, creating institutions or groups that are sort of getting along really well, it really begins with self-knowledge, knowledge of the self. Without knowing ourselves and what we are made of exactly, we can never attain a true sense of empathy with that infinite potential that we just talked about. We can get to other places, like, you know, it might be helpful, you know, find relevance for a product or a design we are creating to, you know, find or market it, you know, because we can maybe think like the consumer to get in their head and answer, you know, put out there the things that they wish to have. But to me, that's a very limited way of approaching empathy, because it is truly a magical thing. Science can explain where empathy happens in our brains. They have figured this out in 1990s, that it happens in our brains when, you know, our neurons mirror another. So they have figured out, they have, you know, visualized where it happens, how it happens, but the answer to why it happens, why are we wired with empathy, is directly related to our humanities and how we are, how we can, you know, make meaning of empathy, even define what empathy can be for our world today. So empathy, you know, once you start going through that knowledge of the self, you know, being on that path, one quickly realizes that we each possess many layers within us. So we each have the duality or the multiplicity of the ability of, you know, causing harm or bringing healing to our world. But at the heart of it, empathy helps us realize that, oh, you know, I have this duality within me, and my choice of being good or being bad at this moment is a choice that I can make. Puts us on a more conscious and intentional way of living, where empathy becomes almost like a part of an ethics that a society can create. Instead of like nice to have feeling, it becomes like the norm and an expectation and an ethical, the right thing to do to be able to empathize. So what is empathy? Empathy has many meanings depending on which discipline you are working on, or which you know, sector you are working on. And when I first started looking at empathy, I was kind of confused because, you know, I'm not a scientist, but my understanding of empathy as a person who has a background in history of art is quite different. So how can I sort of justify, and, you know, who am I to say anything about empathy where, you know, scientists are talking about this in these, you know, very intellectual ways? So I basically looked up the dictionary, right? So what is empathy? Okay, so this is the dictionary of empathy, description of the empathy. The action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another. The origins of empathy, the very first researchers on empathy in the context of the Western world, because empathy is also interesting and there's much work to be done here. The cultural nuances of empathy and the linguistic, you know, influences of how one might see empathy is not really looked at right now. And it is very important because this is very sort of Western oriented description that began in Germany in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then when scientists discovered that there's this neurons in our brain, they respond to another's feelings. So it is always has been in that context. In my research, I encountered some descriptions of empathy that are quite different from what we might see in Google or in a dictionary. So I requested a colleague who actually she's a scientist, behavioral scientist from Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I approached her and I asked for her help, and I said, this is in my culture, this is how we understand empathy. Empathy is not just something transactional that, I get you, you get me, we're okay. But it really leads to an expansive way of, seeing the world. And she was kind enough to listen and provide me with feedback. So this is a chart that I've developed with her help. And these terms are used in the scientific descriptions of empathy also, but I try to explain it in a way in the context of museums and informal learning platforms, what empathy can be and where it can lead to. So emotional empathy is instinctive. It is almost like, if I was biting into a slice of lemon now, you might also feel the sourness in your mouth as if you are also biting into that lemon. So it is instinctive. It takes place, instantaneously, even when without we realizing it. But it also can put us in a vulnerable position because it is so emotional. We don't think and we just act or react through our emotions. Therefore, it might put us in a position of being manipulated. Cognitive empathy, on the other hand, requires effortful thinking. It requires, what it might feel like to be the other, to what I'm looking at, for example. And this requires perspective taking, introspection, and reflection. And all these things can be experienced and practiced. And we each have these layers in ourselves at all times. So it is not like, I've graduated from emotional empathy, now I'm working on my cognitive empathy. It doesn't work that way. It all happens like that slice of onion that we have seen. There are like layers and layers within us that can pop up at any moment. And compassionate empathy, on the other hand, is a cultivated respect and appreciation for the whole, which I like to define the whole as all of humanity and our planet, and with all of its parts. This is where social entrepreneurs find themselves in, and they have this instinct and like drive to serve the whole, to the greater good that they are also a part, and it's really some scientific studies have mentioned that there's the compassion fatigue or empathy fatigue or burnout, but what I found was that it really depends on an individual's traits, psychological and physiological traits on how each individual might react to different levels of empathy. So I love this quote from Susan Lanzoni. She is the author of Empathy, A History. She is a science historian. And at the end of her book, she concludes that the way in which we imagine empathy are important, for these imaginings themselves can open out new possibilities for connection. Empathy dares us to move beyond the habitual borders of the self, to reach toward another human being, animal, art object, or the natural world. We need the self to empathize, but we also have to leave it behind. This is one of empathy's mysteries, but it is also its promise. And this is a really beautiful capturing of empathy as how we are understanding. We can look at empathy at this time, at this moment of our human journey. We talked about empathy as a pair of lenses that we are each embodied and we see the world through our own filters. But we also have to leave it behind because you are suddenly opening yourself up to containing another within you, giving another a space in your heart. And while your ego perhaps is looking at the other way. So I'd like to call empathy as a Achilles heel of our ego. In a moment, we are wired with empathy because ego really loses its power at that point. And even despite its own, like all of its work of always being at the center of our attention and drive us with, according to what the self wants at this lower level, empathy introduces us another facet of ourselves. So I have been working within this context of, informal learning platforms, museums, art, and using museums as contexts within which we can face ourselves, develop a knowledge of the self through engaging with art, objects, natural world, and animals, because museums contain so many varieties of contexts that go just beyond art or beyond, let's say, just like one defined context. But I also found out that it is important, again, to acknowledge one's mindset or the worldview. Because I grew up in this culture, in the culture that I grew up in Istanbul, in Turkey, I grew up with the stories that my parents told me. We have the social norms and expectations. So I cannot think of empathy outside a worldview where everything is one, that we are all one. And then everything in creation respect sort of asks and requests expects our respect. So I call this the oneness mindset. And I think through this mindset, if we look at empathy, it can lead to some of the results that we'll discuss later. So oneness mindset is a master perspective inspiring how we might see our world and our place in it as integral to one indivisible whole, informing how we might design and utilize our tools, including knowledge, resources, institutions, towards harmonious engagements with the whole. Within this context, I define empathy, and it's a working definition of empathy, as a form of perception that enables us to connect with ourselves and with others, expanding our sense of self to include others and the whole, all of humanity, our kin that we share our world with, and our planet. So empathy building here is a intentionally designed, transformative, perspective shifting, perception expanding, lived experience that contributes to the development of an expanded sense of self. Empathy requires a lived experience. It doesn't work with, like users manuals that where you follow the instructions and get to a certain level. When we experience a pragmatic perspective shift, there's this feeling of vulnerability where we feel like the rug is being pulled out under our feet. And it prompts us to reevaluate all of our definitions of who we are, our world, and where we are in this world. So it is quite powerful and profound. So designing for empathy is a framework and an international platform for multidisciplinary, multicultural, and multi-sector collaboration. All these elements are, I find great importance in each of these being multidisciplinary, multicultural, and multi-sector. Because no matter how we invest in empathy and we might develop these resources and tools, if they are not ultimately useful or found relevant in industries or in our communities, in our systems, they will not be used. So we have to have a dialogue going on at an early stage of any empathy building initiative. And the goal is here to deepen our understanding of empathy and to develop context-relevant tools for empathy building, utilizing the oneness mindset as a master perspective. And in my book, Designing for Empathy, I came up with three major questions that I think are essential to any design effort around empathy building. So what is the object of empathy, the alchemy of empathy, and the scope and the spectrum of empathy? We could have a whole session about all this part, so I'm not going to go into a detailed explanation, but very quickly, the object of empathy is about really questioning ourselves, looking at ourselves and our filters through which we perceive the other. Our neurology, our physiology, our spirituality, or even more and more artificial intelligence is becoming another sense through which we engage with the other. So all these filters we need to acknowledge and put on the table so that there's this transparency of approach. And the alchemy of empathy, I came up in my book in this drop, again with the drop and the ocean metaphor continuing here, these ingredients of empathy, those ingredients of those transformative, perspective shifting lived experiences. So when we go through an experience like that, the experience is usually so profound, we don't really take the time to look into what just happened here, what brought me here and why I feel different now. So these are those kinds of elements. And this is not a all-inclusive list, of course. This is just meant to be a conversation starter, but it includes intentionality, proximity, curiosity, intersectionality, synchronicity, play, storytelling, collective journeying, vulnerability, breaking bread, sharing our food, experiences of awe and wonder, and contemplation. The scope and the spectrum of empathy at the end explores, if we can develop empathy, design for empathy as an outcome of a museum experience, for example, then in which ways this outcome, this learned this takeaway can be helpful in our everyday lives. And this includes, of course, the education, the business, entrepreneurship, design, health sector, judicial sector, government, it really permeates all aspects of our lives. So who gets to design for empathy? I believe that we each have the capacity to do that and each have a responsibility to really, first of all, to discover it within ourselves, to help ourselves find our own humanness so that we can recognize it in others. But to do that, it's just like that egg and chicken question, right? So where do we do that? I mean, where do you go to practice your empathy or develop empathy? There are many, many ways of doing this, but I believe museums can be really important platforms for this because of the variety of contexts that can really be relevant to many people. There are science museums, art museums, children's museums, natural history museums, civil rights museums, even zoos and aquariums are considered museums. So each of them can provide, context where we are not really getting graded on our empathy level. There's no exam at the end, but we just can go there and experience and expand our capacity for empathy. It could be a private experience in our own, but we can do it socially also. But we need to build those experiences, and we need to have them available in more and more places in a variety of different forms, so that people and individuals can go and be exposed to such possibilities. So the essential question behind designing for empathy is, and this is mostly because of my background, I did not come through empathy or the importance of empathy through my research in art history or museums. I had a life experience And then I was struggling to define what that experience was, and then I felt really helpless almost, because what can I do with what I know to foster empathy in our world? And when I looked at it that way, I said, okay, I know a little bit about art history, a little bit about museums, this and that. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter. So all these things combined brought me to this point. And but this can be, how might we utilize museums? Museums can be anything. You can just leave it blank and replace your context with it, and start looking at it intentionally. So my first book, Fostering Empathy Through Museums, I was at a museums conference, and I had these questions in my mind, and I approached a publisher and I said, "Do you have any books on empathy and museums?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, I have this idea. I'm thinking, if there are any museums looking at empathy as an intentional outcome of a museum experience." He said, "Oh, that's interesting. Would you like to write one?" I said, "Really, me? Okay, let me think." And that's how it basically started. And I asked museums to respond to a couple of questions that I shared with them. One of them was, what is empathy to you? How do you define it? Does it have a context in your institution? Is it an intentional approach? And if you use empathy in your day-to-day work, where in the continuum of your work you see empathy? Is it a starting point? You start with empathy and then, for example, develop a design, or empathy is a part of the process, like design thinking, for example, you're trying to better understand the problem through empathy or developing empathy skills? Or is it are you sort of offering empathy as an experience, as an outcome of a museum experience? So each museum in this book responded differently. And what I found out was that empathy, of course, it is being used. You cannot separate human beings from empathy, but they were not really looking at it intentionally. And once you put a word and a question there, it almost has they have their own energy, and they draw energy. So once the museum started looking at it, basically the executive summary of this book is, museums indeed can increase empathy in the world. And I collaborated with the editor of Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley, Greater Good Science Center, to develop this really short writing, where they were kind enough to include all the scientific backup into each of these 5 reasons how museums and why museums can increase empathy in our world. So if you go to their website, you can actually click through that link, and they have amazing resources, and I'm sure you'll find very interesting if you're interested in the subject. So museums hold a mirror to society. We talked about the need for facing ourselves in a mirror so that we can understand what we are made of. This is true at individual level, institutional level, or as a society. So storytelling and creating new narratives, storytelling like literature and stories that we grew up with, we are wired to learn through empathy, through stories. And experiential learning, museums can provide opportunities for experiential learning, which is extremely important, because it is not just a passive museum experience where you're just looking at objects. It is important to create an engagement and an experience around an object or around the idea. Museums can also be places of awe and wonder and contemplation. And all these ingredients are scientifically proven that lead to empathy, increase of empathy. So when I looked at museums then through this perspective, I found that museums have been looking at empathy basically in 3 main ways. One is the institutional value. For example, the physical accessibility of a museum, or wayfinding when you are entering. Can you find the restrooms easily, or there are enough benches for people to rest, that sort of thing. And then educational tool is a way for museum to educate the public that comes through their door on a subject that aligns with their mission, with the museum's mission. So it's basically around the specific topic that the museum is trying to build empathy. So, but it doesn't consider that, like expanding that. It's just like their mission is to create empathy to their own topic that they are responsible of, protecting and preserving and making accessible to public in a museum context. And then there were very little, really, one or two places where empathy was being explored as a human phenomenon, which is where I'm most interested in. And these pictures are from the Exploratorium. It's a science museum, science center in San Francisco. But I mean, they look like a science museum, but they're actually a museum of human perception. And they consider the qualities that human beings bring to table as phenomenons, like in physics, we might scientifically look into light, the properties of light or water or energy. So empathy and the decisions that we make are in this museum, are the topics of exhibitions. In the second book, Designing for Empathy, Perspectives on the Museum Experience, I expanded the question to include multidisciplinary and multi-sector experts to provide us with information on how they see some of these ingredients from their perspectives. And how, just gonna check the time quickly, how can we do this, right? So this is basically the summary of some of the design principles one can use as takeaways. It is critical to create a no judgment zone because trust is essential for empathy building. And then you can create a collective journey which is private and social at the same time. So, and we'll see an example of that. And experience vulnerability. So visitor is the subject and the object of the experience, faced with a real-time, real-life dilemma, and immediate real-time choice and action is expected from the visitor, and which is by definition is what an experience is, right? There's a stimulus, and then we responded, and it creates an experience. But empathy building happens in the space that is between the stimulus and our response, because then we can be intentional and really review why we made that choice. That's what I mean by being intentional of empathy building. And I call this triple focus because it requires a conscious awareness of the self, my own filters, the others around me, and then the whole of which we are a part, because it's a social experience. Pausing, noticing, witnessing, and articulating these perception and biases are critical because they can lead to then us taking responsibility of them to regulate. So just very quickly, I'm just to visualize this, whole conceptual presentation with this series of visuals, basically. So imagine yourself, out there in the world. I'm going my way in life, and each self, including myself, come with a worldview, right? And within worldview, there are these paradigms. Paradigms mean that, these paradigms define which questions can be asked and which questions cannot be asked in a field that we have. For example, I consider this art, but this doesn't fit my understanding of the art. So that's my paradigm for art. Similar to science, business, design. So each person has these paradigms, within a larger worldview. So I meet another. So the other also comes with a self-centric worldview, because our ego always wants us to be at the center of attention, to begin with, our own attention to begin with. And then in groups and communities, if we insist and encourage this type of worldview, this creates tension and conflict, which leads to fear and separation, othering and exclusion. And then we realize that these are causing problems because we cannot perform well, we cannot do our work, we cannot deliver things that we are supposed to. So we start creating solutions. We say, okay, then we need to, instead of othering, we need to create, integration. But because we are still looking at the self-centric worldview, even the integration and inclusion, even with the best of intentions, look like this, where individuals might be in the same space, sharing the same space physically, but there's really no meaningful emotional attachment and connection between them, amongst them. So in a snapshot, this is what it looks like. So we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. Integrative journey of the self with the oneness mindset might look like this. It comes with a pre-existing understanding through a worldview or a mindset that the other also has a part of me, and I have another in me as beings. So even though I might look like this in my own body, in essence, we are all connected to everything that exists around us. Through this lens, which can be called the oneness mindset, there's this sense of being a part of something greater than ourselves, like a circle. A circle, by definition, has a center and an infinite number of dots, right, on the circumference that creates a circle. So even though there's only one center, just like the image that we first looked at, each dot's perception of that center, of that reality, by physics, by our existence, the law of nature, will be slightly different. An understanding of this can help us expand our worldview to know that it brings a humility and humbleness that maybe I'm not, like, everybody will see this differently. So you come with that understanding. And through that, you can generate more ideas and more connections, because you realize that it's not just me critical to this circle. I'm not at the center of the circle. Each of those dots are essential to making that circle. They are there for a reason. So it requires, it prompts respect and humbleness, and creates an equal playing field. So on one hand, we have the self-centric worldviews with tension and conflict, and expanded integrative worldviews can lead to a better sense of self and belonging. This doesn't mean that everything has to be same. Like when we talk about oneness, it is not sameness. It is, on the contrary, it is diversity that creates, that manifests oneness. So to be able to see that, we need to sort of develop this capacity to see it that way, because it doesn't always come naturally to everyone. And it is an important skill to see that, because it determines how we communicate to others. It influences our leadership, or just being a good parent, or a good sibling, right, or a good friend. So we talked about empathy as a profound, sort of pragmatic, perspective-shifting experience that can lead to an understanding of the other through an effortful thinking. This doesn't mean that I have to completely agree with another. Their view might be on the opposite spectrum. But because I realize that I'm not any better than that person, we are all dots around that circle, and that also has a reason for being there, creates an understanding and a respect and a more civilized way of approaching, instead of just creating a clash. And when you look at it, let's say in a business meeting, right, you are talking about these things, and one person's worldview puts the spirituality at the center, the other person's put the science at the center, and understanding of this can create this expanded worldview because we appreciate that, oh, that's the narrative of that other dot that I respect. So I can actually expand my worldview to contain and to interact with the other worldview in a way that is not clashing. This is just a quick snapshot, but you can see how these two narratives, two different ways of looking at the world and our place in it, can lead to two different outcomes. Then what? We talked about the potential of empathy for people and the planet. I believe that empathy should be a multi-sector shared value, and museums can play a very important role here because they can be are like empathy gyms, or like incubators of empathy building, where different sectors can come and experience empathy in through their professional development, trainings or leadership development trainings, or medical schools, medical students, doctors, everybody can go through their own sector, own institution, and can have this shared understanding and empathy as a ethical responsibility to bring to table. And in corporate or organizational settings, this is a more detailed visual of what I shared earlier. This can affect actually an organization's talent acquisition and retention, and their ability to have creative partnerships, because they can actually discover more connections, which can influence their ability for innovation and competition. On the other hand, health and well-being is important part of it, and it leads also to our protection of the environment and awareness of our sustainability issues. To conclude, I don't know if you have watched this Netflix series called by Samin Nosrat. It is called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And in each segment, she travels to a part of the world to talk about this one ingredient, one element that, according to her, is essential to great cooking. And she thinks that you don't need expensive or fancy ingredients to have really amazing food, but knowing the qualities and the properties of these 4 elements, salt, fat, acid, and heat, can lead to a better regulation and creating interesting combinations to help us arrive at more successful outcomes. So in her journey, she goes to Japan to examine soy making as part of salt. And I was really taken by that episode because the traditional soy maker, she walks into this building that's basically just looks like wood. It's all entirely made of wood. And the soy maker explains to her how, that he can no longer find the barrels through which, he makes soy, because not anybody, there are very few places in Japan that create soy in traditional way. And he says that I don't make the soy sauce, the microorganisms make it. I just create the environment where they can thrive. So it is very important to understand this. This is all about the qualities that we bring into space. It is not a quantitative science, it's qualitative, and it is about love and compassion and empathy that are, or trust, that is really very difficult to quantify perhaps, but that are essential. So as human beings, that we talked at the beginning of the presentation, that we are thresholds between material, the physical, and the essence. I think this is a very good example of that. Because once you watch the segment, you can see that the wood, the barrels, they have become soy. They might look like wood, but they have become soy. And the soy that it creates, they make, through the microorganisms takes the properties of the wood. And this is really almost like an alchemical reaction to me. So I would like to conclude with inviting everyone to examine, what qualities that we bring into any space, and examining our own filters through which we view the world and our place in it, with the intention that through a knowledge of ourselves, we can better understand others, because we are all one. There's really no other. Once we make certain choices, it eventually affects all of us. So that's why designing for empathy is critical for our world. Thank you again for this opportunity to share, and I'm only 3 minutes short, but if you have the time, I'm happy to do the exercise of which will require people to turn on their cameras. But if this is not the right time, maybe we can do it another time.
I think it's right for me, but maybe the audience is not ready for this part. I don't know, because they cannot share their videos, I think.
That's right, or they cannot talk. I mean, oops. Yeah, maybe for another. So
another
like
time.
this is what maybe I can just share quickly, what I was going to do.
Okay.
So let's see if I can. I'll do this later on. And it doesn't let me. So maybe it is meaningful that it's telling me to stop.
You can first stop the sharing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can share another.
Okay. Let me see. Escape. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. So home trust just okay. See, like this. Trying to go through my. Let me see if I can share now. Zoom.
Okay,
I lost the. I lost the way to to be able to share. Let me see if I can expand again. Maybe. Nope. Oh. Okay. Oh, okay. I found it. Okay, hold on. Desktop. I'm gonna hide this first, and then sorry for making you wait. Hold on. I'm almost there.
It's coming.
It might take a minute. Can you see all the images?
I think we will. It's coming.
Eventually. Okay.
Yeah, now we can see the images.
Okay, perfect.
4 images,
Yeah, four pages basically.
4 pages, yeah. 4 pages.
Yeah. So anyone can develop this exercise with the pictures that you have taken, and you can try with your family and colleagues and friends. So I'm going to suggest, because we don't have enough time, what you do is, each person gets an identical set of cards, like a playing cards. Let's say a number of images, let's say 20 images, but each person has to have the same deck of cards with the exact same images. And then you can decide on a few words to choose from collectively as a group. And these words, let's say home, or friendship, or justice, or truth, or art, So you can pick one word. For the sake of time, would you like to suggest a word? Like could be home or friendship, either one.
Happiness, maybe.
Which one?
Happiness, maybe. I don't know.
Happiness. Okay, happiness. So I would like to ask each person to take 1 minute to choose 4 images amongst these images in a way that how they associate happiness with. Okay, and then I would like to invite individuals to share why they picked those images. And then as more people will share, something magical will happen.
Okay. How many pictures will we choose for happiness?
Four.
Four. Okay. Okay.
Let's take a minute. Yeah.
Mhm. Maybe we can write the pictures from the chat board.
Yeah, you can just tell me, like,
I will tell you. Okay.
the sunflower or the clouds, so we'll understand, I think. But I need at least 2 people to share. So I'm counting on you as one.
Yes, I'm the one. Exactly.
Okay.
Who is the other one? I don't know. Is there any volunteer? Okay, you and me maybe.
Okay, let's do that.
Let me tell you my pictures then.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my first picture is the red ball under the sky, and the second picture is the cats, and the third picture is the park with lights. I don't know the name, and the fourth picture is the window at the end, the window
Okay.
that have the outside view.
Yes. So I would like to ask you to elaborate a little bit. For example, why you picked the red ball with the nature and why the window?
Okay, nature is the big side of the picture. So and I like nature. That's why I choose this picture. And red, the color red brings me the happiness, in fact. And the cats, I love the cats. So the cats bring me happiness. And as I said, the nature also in the last figure, the window figure, nature is the biggest part of the figure. So I choose by this picture. And also the part with lights, it brings me children's, and children also brings me happiness.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. So it is my turn now, right?
Okay.
So my choices were the mussels with the sea star in the bottom of the screen. This is like underwater, like with sea urchins, pomegranates, and the trees that are all like sort of getting together in the sky, and the flower that is growing on the sidewalk.
Completely different.
Completely different, right? So to me, like I love the water, I love the sea. Being underwater gives me peace and happiness, and so that's why I chose the underwater picture. Pomegranates reminds me of the taste, and also it reminds me of the time when we used to sit around in the winter, and peel them with my mother, and then everybody would share it. It's just like the serving and sharing of joy. And the flower evokes in me this determination. Like you sometimes, life throws you difficult things on your way, but happiness also requires determination and a choice, right? That you have to be strong and give hold a optimistic, hopeful outlook to life. And the trees, the magnificent trees are just they're just so wise and so beautiful. It's a joy and such a happy feeling to be around them. So those were my takes. So thank you so much for sharing and playing with me. The thing, if you imagine, like, if you had, around the table 6 people, right?
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Everybody would share their choices simultaneously after like a few minutes of thinking. Uh, so once again, it brings us back to this perception and how we find meaning and how we each find different meaning. And we are looking at the same things, even though, like, I actually thought about picking the red ball in the nature, in the with the mountains in the back. Even though I may pick the same image, my meaning will be different.
Yeah, sure.
Because, because I was there, I took that picture, I remember that day, and it was a gorgeous day. So the reasons that it gives me happiness is
Mhm.
different than maybe another, right? And
Mhm.
so it goes with this, all of these images. So even though we may be looking at the same thing, we might make different meaning. And when we look at different things, our meanings might be the same. Like, we can find meaning in different things, but arrive at the same meaning.
Mhm.
So it is very complex, and the best way to experience it, instead of just talking about it, like, oh, we all look at the world from a different point of view. Yes, we know that. But then experiencing it, especially as if you're a department, or if you're with your colleagues or friends, as a family, it creates a different level of understanding through a lived experience, and becomes more memorable. So this was just a quick taste. Thank you for allowing me to share.
A nice experience for me also. Thank you for this experience and this sharing, Dr. Gülçin. Also, thank you for your presentation. It was really nice for me. I learned many things from your presentations that I thought that I already knew about empathy, but I've learned so many new things. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Aa, dinleyicilerimize de teşekkür edelim katılımları için. Belki hocam dilerseniz kapatalım, kapanış yapalım.
Tamam.
Soru sormak isteyen
Soru sormak isteyenler için, evet, soruları olanlar için. Do you have any questions? In fact, I was wondering about what do you think about artificial intelligence? Is it going to feel empathy? What do you think? Just a small answer, please, because I'm an artificial intelligence researcher and I wonder so much, but I know that it has a huge answer.
Very, very complex and an excellent
Yeah.
question. This is, I think, is what is on everybody's mind. But it is very interesting because, there are some tools that I'm aware of, that are working to foster empathy in like organizations through engagements with artificial intelligence. And those tools that I'm aware of, basically they bring an opportunity for the user to face their own filters. It is very interesting. Let's say we are on a Zoom call. Each of us have this downloaded on our computers. It is not shared with anyone else. It is only for our use. So there's that safety and privacy. But then there are certain questions that the system answers. For example, you were 86% helpful to the other person, and you were your greeting was, like, sort of, it grates you on some of the points that can foster a better dialogue, empathetic dialogue, through individuals. So those tools are very important, but my question is that who's designing those tools, right? Who has access to these technologies? Whose understanding of empathy they might portray? There's so little that we know about empathy within the human context, that is still, like, we have to catch up with that to be able to provide those experiences, so those designers of these powerful technologies can also discover within themselves that, oh, like, I never thought about it that way. so that they can, ask better questions, perhaps, right? That can lead to, more empathy. But the artificial intelligence on its own, I think, I mean, it is not a human being, clearly, right? It's a designed product. But I would like to share something, actually.
But it has self-awareness, and it has also it is aware of the other things. So what you said, as I remembered from your presentation, self-awareness is the first thing of the empathy, and aware of the other thoughts, other things. So the artificial intelligence has many sensors or many inputs. So I think, in my belief, artificial intelligence is going to have empathy in the future.
Yeah, in the future. Well, let's hope so. I have
Yes,
I have
let's
concerns
hope so.
about that, because it depends, like, who's designing it, right? Like, the
It is
designers
the most
today
important question. Yeah,
have
you're
an
right.
understanding of the right kind of empathy, because you can crunch data, and artificial intelligence can bring you the best response, or the most logical response. But to me, I don't think it can really ever replace a human being, because we are embodied beings, and we communicate in more than one ways, even through empathy. Like, being
Right.
close to another human being changes the quality of that empathy, right? Versus being on a Zoom call, for example. Like, if we were having a cup of tea around the table, our engagement, like, our energy will be different, right? So I think
Yeah, sure.
the way I understand artificial intelligence could be a little bit like that, that there's always going to be a little sort of layer.
I know this question has also maybe needs a talk itself. Okay, so thank you for your
Absolutely.
listen now. For now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz Elif Hanım. Ve başka bir perspektiften bakmamızı sağladınız. İstanbul'a geldiğinizde mutlaka konuğumuz olun. Çok memnun oluruz. Çok
Çok
teşekkürler.
teşekkür ederim. Çok teşekkürler beni davet ettiğiniz için. İyi günler
Görüşmek üzere.
dilerim. İyi akşamlar
Sağ olun,
dilerim.
iyi
Hoşçakalın.
akşamlar.
İyi akşamlar.